We'll now discuss one of the 4 principles of trauma recovery yoga, which is accessibility. We start with accessibility because in order for people to be able to practice or understand what we're doing in the first place, we need to make our language, our approach, our outreach as accessible as possible. Accessibility in a trauma-informed setting means just that, making sure our practices and the information that we're sharing is accessible to anyone and everyone, regardless of where they're located, what language they speak, their education or religious background, etc. So I will be referring to our workbook and moving through and discussing some of the points we have on the importance of accessibility. Starting with community outreach. So this is near the bottom of the list, but I feel it is incredibly important because if we are not doing our best to reach people who cannot otherwise access TRI or the various services that we provide, then it will never get there in the first place. We'll never have the conversation and the possibility of getting them on a yoga mat. So community outreach, partnering with local people and organizations, local leaders who can bring us to people who are in most need. Then, inclusive language and communication. So using language that's clear and sensitive to diverse experiences, also based in choice, which we'll go in depth into very soon. As well, inclusive language means that we are simplifying things as much as possible and speaking to our audience. We always want to meet people where they are and speak in language that they'll understand. So if I am facilitating a TRI training to a group of Syrian refugees here in Iraq versus medical professionals elsewhere in the world, I will be presenting the information and customizing the content in a different way. So always meeting people where they are and doing so as gracefully as you can. Accessibility with the trauma-informed approach. So training instructors to recognize and respond to trauma triggers. This is a huge part of what we're doing. Creating a safe and supportive environment for all participants, or doing our very best. So really emphasizing a trauma-informed approach. And we, as the TRI team, do our very best to provide quality services, workshops, and trainings to our teachers, like in this training, for example, as well as training facilitators to be able to hold space in a trauma-informed way, and not just in a trauma-informed way, but moreover in an empowering way. Adapting class offerings. So this goes along with choice-based language, is offering options, offering different options of postures, for example, for people to do in a TRI class to make the physical practice more accessible. Being culturally sensitive, so being mindful of cultural differences and practices, ensuring that the yoga classes are culturally sensitive. This is also something that our team has a great deal of experience in, especially since we have worked primarily in the United States and in the Middle East, where when we moved here, it was a transition and really adapting our practices, our trainings, and a bit of the content to make it more globally accessible. The physical space, thinking about accessibility within the physical space that you're teaching or training in. So choosing accessible venues with features like ramps, elevators, and sufficient space for easy movement and wheelchair access. We do the best with the spaces that were provided, but really keeping this in mind to make the spaces as physically accessible for people as possible. Offering affordable options is also a very relevant and common thing that we are navigating, because we want our services to be as accessible financially as possible. Many of our TRI programs that are funded, they are funded and provided at no cost. They're free to participants, whereas we also have paid services to help contribute to all of the services that we're providing for free. And still, we understand that people are doing the best with what they have financially for the most part. And so providing sliding scale options and making things as financially accessible as possible. That also goes for when you're teaching TRI classes. Keep in mind the audience, the geographic area that you'd be teaching in, and whether or not people would be able to pay anything, $5, $10, and so on. Also, having things donation-based can be really helpful for people. So if they can contribute, they will, but if someone can't, they don't need to explain that they can't, but they can still participate in the practices. Language accessibility. So we talked a little bit about language in one sense, but in another sense, it's translating our content and our practices into other languages. So as of the time of this recording, our content, our member site, everything is translated into Spanish, Arabic, Ukrainian, as well as 3 dialects of Kurdish and English. Some of our content is also in Dari for Afghani participants. But this was really out of a need to be able to speak to people here who desperately need these practices, who we're here to serve, but everything needs to be translated for them to understand to the best of their ability, of course. So having the content and live interpretation translated into the local languages. And then collaboration with professionals, as I mentioned, collaborating in the outreach and implementation of classes or projects with local leaders, with local nonprofit organizations or companies, people who know their people, they know their community, and you are just coming in with an incredible service to support. So really trusting the wisdom of the locals and letting them lead the way as much as possible. That is it for accessibility. As you can see, it really seeps into many layers of what we're doing. There are so many different ways to diversely think about accessibility and how you can make different aspects of any trauma-informed work more accessible for people. Because if it's not accessible in the first place, none of the rest of it really counts. It really starts with accessibility. This is the foundation of meeting people where they are so that we can really help them heal, integrate their trauma,